Hi everyone. Hello Facebook fam. So it is Friday the 13th and we're headed into the No Kings protest. And I guess I want to say that there's just so much information floating around, and I want you to know prime directive. My prime directive is to use the free channels of information that we have in this country and this hemisphere, or whatever. Most of the world we have connectivity, but to use and also use what we have rooted in the Constitution, right? Which I can do as a citizen to prevent bloodshed. That is my prime directive. Would you really distill down what has gone on in all of our lives? You can kind of put it into several categories. Now, all of the things that we can be sad about is unpredictability, volatility, and violence. Those things we remember and think back on for many, many years, whether it's gang violence or drugs, in our communities in the United States or Europe. If you're speaking English, you're either in those countries, or you're, in Australia and perhaps the former Commonwealth countries, Britain. But we can kind of pinpoint those moments in our lives when tragedy struck, right? When the promise of someone's potential was struck down senselessly, and we who remain, who had to pick up the pieces, right? Pick up the pieces of our lives, the lives of our dear friends and our neighbors. And we've heard many express in poetry that God takes away, He giveth and He taketh away, and there's really nothing you can do but accept it. And for the most part, that is true. But I have seen a pattern, and the pattern is, as much as we think of societies in the Western world here are advanced, okay, and that we've made advancements in science and technology, and that we have provided for the greater good, and that everyone wants to come either to here or Western Europe to get away from what we see as perhaps backward thinking, especially when it comes to the treatment of women and, the levels of indentured servitude that people might have in other countries in the developing world. And none of it was ever really connected, right? It's not connected to our lives. But then people started to wake up, right? And say, oh, well, maybe it is connected. Maybe we in the United States consume too much. If you were of a leftist bent, you think we shouldn't have people on the streets in this country, right? And then there was a time in the 1990s where it was popular actually to complain about sending money overseas when we had citizens right here at home who weren't where they weren't okay. They weren't okay, all right? And, well, that's still the case, but it's no longer really popular to complain about that because Ukraine and, well, it's a different, like, people really, they tend to get exasperated with narratives that don't quite add up, and so then they just throw out the whole thing that they may have been thinking. For instance, there was a big push, to say, look, let's really look at this, sorry, I don't know if I'm going to get censored by saying that word, back in the 90s, and then other people were saying, if you were the head of a school or anything, it's like, no, make sure everybody gets that, because otherwise you're going to expose yourself to massive liability, right? Did anybody ever really go and look back through it all and figure out what might be the actual problem? What might be a scientific study that was suppressed or retracted? Well, no. You know why? Because we just don't think like any government body or large corporation, would have enough power to completely silence the full picture from coming out, correct? Yes, I thought so too. I thought our institutions generally pointed toward the good. And many people still think that. Did I have some grand shattering of my illusions? It was gradual for sure, but make no mistake, I think our worst enemy, as I've said before, is the idea that we don't think there is an enemy that's evil enough to convince us that he, it, they does not exist. And unfortunately, the very rude awakening I have seen through a pattern is that human life is not valued by our institutions. As long as they have plausible deniability, and as long as this idea would never be traced back to them, then they behave with impunity. Because, again, when you start to dig in there, and you really get down to, like, why did a hydroxychloroquine factory burn down in India right when people were realizing that it works very well for malaria, and malaria attacks the red blood cells. And I found on a hemoglobin website, a hemophilia website. Well, apparently this shopping center I'm at is very popular because I cannot even find parking, but on an obscure hemophilia website, I found that hydroxychloroquine is taken in Africa to prevent malaria, because malaria, a parasite, it feeds off of red blood cells, the hemoglobin that is the carriers of red blood cells that carry oxygen to the rest of the body from the lungs. In fact, I have screenshots of the State Department saying pregnant women should take hydroxychloroquine before going to Africa. Pregnant women, children, anyone. There are no restrictions, right? The State Department of the United States. And in Africa, the pill is called Sunday Sunday, because everyone just takes it once a week, Sunday Sunday, to prevent malaria. Now, why did the academic establishment, who are herd animals, essentially, at this point in our country's history, why did they jump up and become enemies of hydroxychloroquine? If it could possibly help. We had a study called a PrEP study, which was for first responders, that was all scheduled. It was going to be worldwide. I was highly anticipatory of it. It never went anywhere. It sat in a drawer, the proverbial drawer, and died. The study from the VA that went into medical records, so it was just a survey study, meaning nothing was actually performed. But somehow I think they have a control group, which was the cohort that didn't take the medication in question. But anyway, that study that came out on April 21st, 2020, that killed hydroxychloroquine as a very helpful piece of ammunition against this pneumonia-like virus. That study had very amplified levels of administration of this. Why? One study, they gave them a very high dosage, and these veterans in the VA system, not a real prime, like a paragon of efficiency anyway, right? These men were sick already. Men and women were already very sick. This was the study to kill all other studies that the UN had sanctioned and already begun on hydroxychloroquine. They managed to cancel Didier Raoul, Dr. Didier Raoul, who was born in Senegal. His father was a virologist. He was a virologist. He would go back to Senegal and Africa every year to learn more. They canceled him. The New York Times, Sunday magazine, canceled this man. They compared him to Trump early on. They did not want solutions. Then, with ivermectin, whose inventor won the Nobel Prize, they killed that too. Why? There is more, but I hesitate on this platform. I had all of this information in early 2020. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I know what is possible. And I watched in horror as people were allowed to die from a virus that really only threatened the elderly. I knew where it had been likely created or something very similar. We had the study. We knew it all. So instead of digging for that truth, we throw up our hands and we say, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I have no sympathy for you if you have suffered from the operations similar to the things I've talked about. Not anymore. Don't join these protests because they are a setup. Freedom of speech, which includes protest, right, is how we're going to get out of this. Unfortunately, if you go to a managed event, you could very well likely be injured or jailed. And not because of anything you did that you planned out or premeditated, simply for being caught up in it. I've endorsed the truth since 2017, not Trump. But this man does deserve for people to look at him accurately. You don't put yourself out there for that much scrutiny without having everything, including the kitchen sink, thrown at you, true and false. So I will lose my temper at times because this stuff does matter. I was gonna, I had planned out more of a thing to say about the immigration issue, but at this point, I'm kind of hungry. I'm planning to do some more videos later in the day, and I will say one thing I had planned to say, and that is people who consider themselves socially aware. Let's put it that way: socially and politically aware, and they're well informed by design, by their own design. They wonder how someone could say that enforcing immigration laws right now is a good idea. Remember, what you don't know can hurt you, okay? The fact is, it's not a question of whether anyone from Latin America, anyone brown or black, is prone to committing more crimes. They are not. That is unprovable. That has never been the question. The question is, why are these people being rejected by their own societies? Now, when I say these people, we have to be careful. I don't mean your friend who works with you. No, of course not. I don't. I mean that there's been a very cynical attempt to transport people instantly out of a place of crisis and directly to our country. We've all seen it. When the disaster occurred at the airport in Kabul, Afghanistan, 13 servicemen and women were killed in a terrorist attack at the airport, right? Remember those first flights out? You saw the interior. There were a couple like publicity flights from the military that showed the interior of some C-130s, and those C-130s are giant, right? And they had just people everywhere. And I remember seeing it was like diplomats, a lot of translators, people from Afghanistan who had helped us. But not always. They were just Afghans being brought directly to the United States immediately. It was almost like that had been planned more than the protection, of the operation, of the exit. It was done ass backwards. Is it Kandahar, where our big airbase was abandoned first. That was not a good idea. Okay. So that all happened. I thought, yeah, but there were actual American citizens still left there. Why? Who engages in bungled military operations and then has more of a plan to bring people here? Maybe they don't want to come here. Maybe they would have rather have just had their country not be messed with. A lot of people think that radical Islamic terrorism is like it's its own entity. It just started organically on its own. No, I'm one of the people who has seen evidence that it is also an operation. We don't have to be over there. They've been doing the bidding of the evil ones for a long time. And I'm telling you, the way that these violent events get created, conjured even, is really disgusting. And I woke up this morning seeing narratives changing, seeing, people on social that I would basically just call pawns. Trump is trying to say that their immigrants are bad people. That argument flew with me 8 years ago. It does not fly with me anymore. Do you understand? If you lived in South Central, if you lived, off the Harbor Freeway in LA and you're USC, you would understand the facts of the situation a lot better. Hispanics died of COVID in much larger numbers in Los Angeles than any other group. Why? Because they're living in areas that are very dangerous so that they can save up their money and send it back to the people they care about that they had to flee, right? Keep your knowledge top of mind because it will help you not to get caught up in narratives. What is a narrative? A narrative to me is something that is not the full picture. It is a slice and it pulls at you and makes you feel guilty. Then you have to remember, wait, the leaders in this area do not care about Hispanics or Latinos or the recently arrived. What they care about is covering their asses and answering to whatever it is that is running this show, staying out of trouble and keeping their head down. Anyone who tries to do good as a leader will get that phone call or that, person masquerading as a good member of the government, but really is part of the very, very evil and cynical architecture that has infiltrated all of our institutions. So I don't really care. I mean, I do care. I have been labeled a conspiracy theorist for far too long. So I follow clear ethical principles when I do my fact finding. And then if I just have a suspicion that's not actual fact, I will let you know. But I'm telling you right now, if you succumb to this narrative that you've got to get out there in the streets and show the public that you're not going to let ICE enforce U.S. immigration laws, you are a pawn. I don't know how else to say it. So, I would really like you to stick with me because I think that fixing the information channels it's our best bet, our best option for trying to turn this around. Because when the people are awake to the same full 360-degree picture, and we don't make idols of anyone, nor do we unfairly try to tear down someone trying to do good, then they cannot stop us, okay? But only then. You might be offended. You might say, oh, well, you started off with good intentions, but now we can't have debate on your site. Enough. I don't buy with that. I don't buy that argument, okay? You can debate on my site. Just don't be disrespectful to me. Don't talk down to me, and don't look down on me. Then we'll have a good conversation with a level playing field, because that's what I've been trying to cultivate all along, to conjure. But right now, we are watching from last weekend or whatever, when people were burning cars, up until now, we are watching a very, very bad event become conjured. So do you want to prevent that? I do. Then hold that frequency that it doesn't have to happen. Just say to yourself, it does not have to happen. And be open to anyone who might benefit from hearing from you about it. Sorry, my lips are dry. I can barely smile. Whoever that is, bless you. And I will speak to you very soon. Probably later this afternoon, I'll be posting more. Take care, keep calm, and share. Above all, share. Complete facts. Happy Flag Day for tomorrow.